Hello people. I wanted to talk about the Law of One, session 87.6. I used to have a video explaining my sources, so saying this is the Law of One, this is why I think it is legitimate and such like that. But as I became more determined to make higher quality videos, I got rid of a lot of those videos. So perhaps I need to remake it, but I will just say briefly that I consider the Law of One a very good source of information and leave it at that for the moment. There are many concepts in the Law of One that I think would be worth making a video about, in the same way that I've done with previous videos. But rather than making a video about a certain session, session 19.17, I will just describe it briefly here, that in the Law of One there is a good path and a negative path. The good path is, as you might expect, as most of the people here, I assume, or all of the audience would be polarizing down the positive path, would be aware of it and would be aware of their goals down that path, and that the goal down that path is more positivity, more serving others, more love and such like that. But in the Law of One there is also a negative path, and the negative doesn't just stop in our kind of world, it goes up into space and all that kind of stuff, and loads of very negative demonic entities all around the place. And the point is that there is a pathway of the dark. So we'll leave that there. And why is that relevant? Well, this influences our everyday lives because, of course, we are dealing with governments and other organisations and very unusual things on this planet that interact with us in a certain way, and that's what this video is about. So the Law of One group, the three of them, were being targeted by an extremely powerful and negative entity that was attacking them psychically, you might say. And this session here explains something about how that negative thinks, and I will mention that I think this can be extrapolated to how all the negative think. So here is the quote. I won't go through it by quoting what they actually say. The reason is because the language is so unusual, and this comes quite late in the book where the groundwork has been laid to be able to understand statements like this. But there are 2 points that I want to specifically draw out. The first is what it says at the very end there. It says that an individual doesn't have the ability to stand against the incredible power of this negative entity that was targeting the group. The only way that they could defend against it was to, in a way, align with positive forces that protected them. But that's all that would happen, protect them. I think this obviously is relevant to our daily lives. I think a lot of us have at some or another point, some of us maybe, not a lot necessarily, but a good deal of us have met a situation where there is a few negative people about. Most of us, this would not be anything on a grand scale. Most of us, this would be, say, workplace bullying or something like that. But the point is when you are faced off against 10, 20 people, something like that, you don't actually have the power to really challenge these people. I mean, the law says that you have the power, but in practice you don't. And I think that's important and relevant. But the main point that I wanted to talk about, the main reason I made the video, or the motivation, was that I have been thinking for a while of the principle here with the negative that anyone that they encounter that they cannot control depolarizes them. Now, this statement by the law of one contact was referenced in relation to galactic monster levels of negativity, like an entity in some sort of dimension where they're all negative like this, really working on the negative service to self power. But if you think of just how the negative works in our general life, just how it is when you meet someone that's just really nasty, it kind of fits. Just like the highest positive vibration you can imagine, the highest positive thing, an incredibly loving angel maybe, or Jesus, as is the ideal for many people, positive people that come from that are very similar to that positive entity. It's a matter of degree, obviously, but it's like the microcosm of the behavior is seen in just everyone, while the macrocosm might have some pretty amazing manifestations. The microcosm is still the same kind of thing. When you're dealing with gossipy, nasty unpleasantness in general, we don't need to say that these are negative people necessarily. But if we think of this, then how does this sense of needing to control absolutely everything manifest in the mundane world that we see? Well, if you get a bunch of nasty, gossiping, unpleasant types of people, what is gossip? Well, gossip is often this kind of sense of perfectionism. People are judging the other person. He should or should not do this. She should or should not do this. They should or should not have this or that political opinion. It's an attempt to change and control the person, but because the gossipers are not very committed to changing the other person, or perhaps they are not courageous enough to actually try it in person, this mental effort of trying to control the person just happens inside their mind. But we can see that this behavior is a thing, and we know that people that are like that are gossipy and unpleasant, anyone in their life that isn't able to be controlled or influenced in the way they want will get gossiped about and will get ganged up on, usually by a group of these sorts of people. And this goes out through how companies work. You get a lot of gossips at companies, but it also works through governments and bureaucracies and stuff like that. Like, what are the points against the government that the libertarians often come out with? They often say that they just want to be left alone, but the government is making efforts to involve themselves in their business, things like making it illegal to collect rainwater, making it more difficult to live off the grid, all that kind of stuff. And if you think about the way everything works in our society from that political standpoint, I think it becomes very clear how true this is. The mainstream in, say, medical matters is very determined to control people's thinking on certain issues. There is no small part of the world that the government doesn't want to be involved in. They want to tax unrealized gains. They want to find a way to do that. And as it was alluded to here but not really expanded upon, this is why the positive is a real threat to the negative. People that are positive and not easy to control like this. Once a positive person comes along and inspires a different way of doing things, says, yeah, we don't need to be under control of this government or whatever happens to be, and is very motivating, perhaps religious in a positive way, then that is a real threat to the negative that wants to control everyone, and it wants to convince everyone that being controlled by that entity is best for them. So it doesn't only want to control people, it wants those people to praise being controlled. And this is how I think of globalism. So if you think of globalism, it happens in every single country. I mean, of course, the BRICS as such maybe aren't cooperating with the Western globalists, but of the Western countries, there isn't a powerful one that is standing against the others until now, until America potentially. Like, immigration is happening in all of these countries. DEI is happening in all of these countries. High taxation, more control is happening in all of these countries. And like I said, there is a very clear reason why they don't want anyone to do things any differently. Just think about how bad it will be for all the countries in the EU to have America doing all the policies that the populace wants in most countries and that the globalists aren't doing. Imagine he does deport all the illegal immigrants that aren't likely to provide any benefit to America. Let's say they do decrease taxes. Let's say they do start talking about a lot of things that are global issues, like the medical situation we had with the lockdowns and such in 2020. Anything that comes out in America will go across the whole world. And if the Trump administration is doing things very, very positively, then it will inspire the citizens and the politicians in the UK, which are aligned with Trump, that way of thinking. And you can see how this is all very, very negative for the negative, or something that they would not prefer. And I think this is a massive key to understand everything going forward. As the Trump administration moves forward, assuming that it is very positive, and as Russia wasn't able to be controlled, they didn't just sit back and let Ukraine join NATO and put nuclear weapons on Ukraine's soil. So Russia refused to be controlled, and the globalists obviously didn't like that one, and America refuses to be controlled. We could see how this could completely unravel the globalist powers in every other country. We already have Elon Musk recently pushing back on the Rotherham scandal in the UK, and that is pretty significant because the government in the UK has suppressed any conversation about that or any justice or accountability on that set of crimes. And yeah, well, that's the point. So some of what I do on this channel is to try and map out the kind of future in relation to the human design and stuff. And I think this single concept here might be very, very important to understand. There are other potential international developments that might be very, very relevant, like a new payment system and such, a gold-backed currency from the BRICS or whatever it happens to be. But I just wanted to bring in this concept of the negative having to control absolutely everything in their environment and everything everywhere that they can possibly control, and how that might be relevant to the modern day. Anyway, thank you for listening.